Hey there, Radioheads. Welcome to another episode of Radio KBE, and we have another episode of Russ Watch, which has been the ongoing theme for the past, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks now. Quite literally every single day, people are talking about whether Westbrook is going to get traded, even though we've been constantly saying, and if you guys have been following, if you've been watching the videos, I mentioned a while back, like he's not going to get moved until Kevin Durant gets moved. So it's just an ongoing exercise. A I don't know what you would call it, but it's just an ongoing exercise of a whole bunch of information coming, or not information, but like new information coming out about Russ that has nothing to do with anything, and then people just projecting kind of their thoughts and stuff like that on just projecting their thoughts on like the relationship and stuff like that. So, Russ goes to the summer league. He sits with the Lakers bench. LeBron sits on the opposite side of the court. A lot of different people go and say hi, hello to LeBron, and Russ doesn't go. Now it's a conversation about just where their relationship is at with as players. LeBron goes to the Drew League and plays there, and Kyrie's reportedly supposed to go there as well, but he doesn't show up at all, and nothing is made of that. And even though a whole bunch was made of both of them showing up, and then Russ splits with his longtime agent, and then there's speculation, and then the report about that was very bizarre. It didn't make any sense in the sense of this. Um, the agent was saying that Russ's value in terms of getting moved for the past couple of years, when Russ has gotten moved, teams have given up assets to get Russ on the team, and the agent is now saying that in order for Russ to be moved to another team, the Lakers would have to give up assets. So it's his recommendation that Russ stays with the Lakers, and Russ doesn't ask, as opposed to like wanting to be traded. And then immediately after that, we have local LA writers just kind of mention Russ has never asked for a trade. This is very bizarre like article because there was no reason for the explanation to be made, and it almost seems like it's very much a parting shot from the agent about Russ to attack his character. That's been the core theme um, this entire offseason. Like we know about the basketball fit and all that sort of stuff, but there's been this like daily attack on him as a player for I don't know what reason now at this point. But that obviously the long having a long time agent say what he says, and then you get the people around it that add to it, and the writers that do that by adding their own speculation to what it is. So because Russ split with his agent, all of a sudden there must be a lot of people around him saying, the agent saying if the agent split with him and he said this, then things must be really really bad on the back end. And it's just I don't it could just be a bad it could be the business relationship is over. Like if Russ turns around and signs with a different agency, if he signs with I don't know, Clutch, like what happens with that narrative, right? And so that sort of thing is a little bizarre. Like the way that like every small piece of information and body language and every single thing has been sort of turned into this daily conversation about Russ as a player or Russ's relationship and whether he wants to do stuff, whether he isn't. Like that, and we know that like Darvin Ham has spoken openly about him, that he's had open and active conversations with him. Russ has been there in support of him as a coach, and he showed up even the summer league. Like I saw something out there saying like, oh, Russ is talking to a bunch of summer league players when and then just name calling and stuff like that. And it's just and it was actually kind of nice to see people sort of push back on it because he is a Hall of Fame player and he's talking to guys that are trying to make it in the league and encouraging them and stuff like that. And I thought that was really good. Like that would be like the normal way anybody would look at that situation. Like there's a Hall of Fame point guard that's on your team, regardless of how he played last year. He's out there encouraging young guys to play hard, whatever it is, so they can win their summer league game. But the way that like these conversations just keep getting turned into just attacking the player for like no reason, it just doesn't make any sense. So what again, this is just noise. That's one of the reasons why I'm just not gonna participate in it anymore. So what's like the reality of the situation? Nothing has changed really since the last time we've discussed this. Kevin Durant hasn't quite figured out. Well, that's not true. As it relates to some of the things around the league that have happened, some things have changed. But as it relates to has Kevin Durant gotten traded, has Kyrie Irving gotten traded, like nothing has changed. Everybody is still in a holding pattern because I suspect the Nets are trying to figure out, trying to get the best possible package in return for Kevin Durant. There's been a lot of like sharing information, like speculation that they're going to just run things back with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, and I'm still of the mind that they're not going to do that. I do not see a situation where this is like a reparable situation. Like, if Kyrie is going to be out of Brooklyn, right, and Josai doesn't want him in Brooklyn, he is going to get moved at some point. I have no reason, and assuming he doesn't want the contract terms that Josai wants, like the Nets and Sean Marks, they want to give him. I don't see that situation as a repairable situation. I just don't. And what's worse is, or what complicates it more is, I don't know how much Kyrie or KD are willing to waste a season or risk injury and jeopardize themselves further for a team that doesn't want them. Or, the Nets want KD, but, I don't know if Kyrie does that. And I've never seen a situation where that sort of happens, where they just play out the season. It didn't happen with Anthony Davis. I've never seen a player of their caliber make a trade request and then that just works out that way. It just doesn't. And so, again, this is just a holding pattern sort of thing. The deadline I would probably put on it is training camp. I don't think they want to bring Kyrie back into training camp. I don't think they want to bring Kevin back in training camp. And those are valuable reps that, if Kyrie is back, valuable reps that the younger guys miss out on. The Cam and Kessler Edwards and all the other guys that they have on their roster, like they want to give reps to those guys. You want to get the ball in Ben Simmons' hands if he's going to be the guy that they're going to be using moving forward and stuff like that, and whatever brand of basketball they want to play. So I just don't see it. Maybe they'll do it. It's very, very hard to see a situation like that working out without some sort of like real hard deadline to it. So, but still, that's still a while away. So who knows when these sort of things happen. But there are some other things that have happened. DeAndre Ayton signed a max offer sheet. So Phoenix sort of, and the reason I'm mentioning all these things is because there are areas of opportunity now for the Lakers to possibly be players in, if they do decide to move Westbrook to teams that may want to take him on so they can buy him out or something like that. And so one of the things that I think is very interesting is that DeAndre Ayton signed an offer sheet with the Pacers, and Phoenix instantly matched it. And them matching it is not so much of a big deal, but the big deal sort of is that I don't know what that relationship is going to be like. They clearly wanted Ayton to find himself a max offer because they thought that his offer sheet would come in below that, and he did find one. And I don't know, he's got a veto clause for this year because they match his offer sheet, and they can't trade him, I think, for a couple months. But I'm very curious to see like just kind of how that situation sort of works out, because I would imagine if they didn't value him at a max and he valued himself at a max, and they made him go out there and find something for himself, they sort of put him in a very difficult position. It's just kind of openly a front office telling you that we don't think you're worth what you think you're worth, and you have to prove it to us. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that situation is very repairable or if it's not repairable, or if that relationship is affected at all. So it'd be very interesting to see how things go about in that situation. So that was a large move that happened. And then, obviously we have the Rudy Gobert trade to the Timberwolves. So there are, when the season was over, there was two teams that were specifically sort of mentioned as teams that were destinations for players, for a player like Russ. Not necessarily as he would finish his career there. More as they would go there, he would be traded there, and then they'd probably buy him out because they're in rebuilding mode or something like that. Anyways, um, the two teams that were mentioned at the time were a team like Charlotte, and another team that was mentioned was Indiana. Charlotte's been relatively quiet, especially after the Miles Bridges thing, and then Indiana, we just saw them try to land Ayton with a max offer sheet, and then for the Suns just to match it. So one of the things that's been very interesting to see now is since that point, like I said, Charlotte's been quiet, but the Spurs have emerged as a team with a lot of cap space that could be a potential. We'll absorb Russ, send out a bunch of mid-tier salaries. We're trying to tank. Their goal is to probably buy out Russ as well. Indiana is still sort of available there because they have Miles Turner's contract and they have Buddy Hield's contract. But another team that's sort of emerged as a potential, destination to drop off is a team that sort of softened their stance on Donovan Mitchell, and it's the Utah Jazz. And there's been a lot of heavy rumoring that Donovan Mitchell is, very coveted by the New York Knicks. He wants to be in New York. They just signed Jalen Brunson, and so the Knicks may be, they have a lot of picks. They have like four first rounders that aren't their own, and then they have their own 4 first rounders. And so after the Rudy Gobert trade, Utah is in a situation right now where they have and what I'll do now is I'll just sort of pull it up now so that we can actually go over this together. Let me switch it over and then make myself a little bit smaller so you guys can actually see what it is. But Utah is a team that has, I'll put myself in the corner here. Utah is a team that has, like, interestingly, they have 13 players on the roster post Rudy Gobert trade. They signed an overseas player, Simone, and so they're at about 14 players. And now they're sort of being speculated as a team that may potentially go to tear it down and rebuild completely if they move Donovan Mitchell. So one of the interesting parts of the situation is we know about the Spurs, we know about Indiana, but now Utah turns into a team that may potentially be a Russ destination in terms of Russ gets sent over there and with the full intention of him being bought out. He won't play a single minute there, I would imagine. And Utah is in a situation where they have a lot of role players, a lot of mid-tier role players. You see the same thing with the Spurs with Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott, Jakob Poeltl, Zach Collins, those sort of guys. And then with Indiana, it's with those two main guys, Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Utah is another team that sort of fits into this mold, where if their goal is just to get as many picks as possible and expiring contracts as possible, if they're trying to work out a deal with New York, and the salaries that New York is sending back are they don't have that many expirings, then the Lakers can help facilitate this trade to some degree. So if you look at their top 3 or 4 salaries that New York has, they have they signed Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle is still there on the books for another $114 million. Evan Fournier is still on there for $55 million. Mitchell Robinson just got a new deal, I believe, and so he's also on there as well. So one of the things that's very interesting to see about this sort of process in this conversation is the Lakers may end up becoming a team that the Knicks call to possibly tab as a team that has the one large expiring contract to send to the Jazz so the Jazz can eventually buy that one player out. Remember, when you do something like that, it is advantageous for a team like the Jazz because they can send out, if it's not just Donovan Mitchell, they may send out Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, Bojan, or a bunch of smaller tier salaries maybe to a team like the Lakers because the Knicks don't want to take those players back. So the Lakers become this ground where they can absorb players from both teams that add up to what Russ's total amount of incoming salary is. So if you guys remember, in order for the Lakers to, if the Lakers send out Russ at $47 million, because we are a tax team, let me pull up my handy dandy calculator, because they are a tax team, they can bring back up to $58.8 million. So very roughly under $59 million in return. So that could be in the form of, players that come from the Knicks and players that come from that come from the Jazz too as well. And Russ's large outgoing salary would go to a team like the Jazz who want to buy them out. If that's the direction that they're going to be going in, they're going to be rebuilding or bottoming out or whatever it is that they're going to be doing. So that part's very interesting to see. And I think as of today, Mark Stein reported that the Knicks may call about Russ, or the Knicks may call the Lakers. And the speculation is that they're calling in regards to Russ, but I don't think they're calling in regards to Russ in order to get Russ on the Knicks. I think they're calling in to see, hey, would the Lakers be willing to move him to a team that doesn't want to take on our players? So if the Jazz go to the Knicks and they say, hey, we don't want Evan Fournier, we don't want Randall, we don't want any of these guys that you're sending, you need to find a large expiring somewhere somewhere around the league to send to us, and we'll send out Mike Conley, right? We'll send out Bojan Bogdanovic and their extra money that they have, right? So Bojan Bogdanovic and Mike Conley, they make about, what is this, 41 million, right? 41.9 million. So maybe you could squeeze in an extra salary here, 41.9 million. So the difference is about 18 million. So maybe they send Conley, Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson, or whatever combination of players added to 59 million. They send out all of that money to a team like the Lakers, who needs role players, veteran role players who can sort of fit some of those roles. They take on Russ. They buy him out. They've saved themselves a ton of money, long-term, short-term, and then they get the 4 or 5 picks or whatever it is. The reason why it's very unique, it's an interesting situation, this Jazz and Knicks thing and the Lakers inserting themselves, is because the Knicks have a lot of picks. And if they really want Donovan, the Lakers may not necessarily have to give up a first rounder to send Russ to a team like the Jazz, because they're already getting so many picks, right? So unlike a team like the Nets, who are in their situation because of the relationship that's been broken between Kyrie and Brooklyn, and that they can't. It's a different situation. If the Jazz know they want to rebuild, then taking on expirings is not a big deal for them if they're sending out more money. And of course, the Lakers, like I've advocated before, the Lakers cannot do both things. They can't say that, hey, we're not going to give a first rounder to get off of Russ. And they also can't say, no, we won't be willing to take on some more money in Russ's contract. From an asset management standpoint, like a cap thing, that doesn't work. And the other thing also is the Lakers doing that, and it's not good. It's not a good basketball thing, right? Like, we've built out our roster a certain way, but we need more shooting. We need better. We need a few more vets that are a little bit more long in the tooth that can play their role. So from a basketball fit standpoint, the Lakers should try to maximize however many role players they can bring onto their roster. So I think that's an inescapable thing. And if they don't want to give up the picks, I would highly, highly recommend that they take on the players. And so I think that's the best way to do it. I think that's the best way to go about doing it. But like I said, nothing's going to really happen until they know what they want to do, and until the Nets know what they want to do. I think the Lakers really want to get Kyrie, but it has to be cost prohibitive. Like, he has no market. He has none. The threats of him coming back to training camp mean nothing, because he's not going to be there next year. And if you're one of those fans that said, hey, we should have just waited an extra season to get Anthony Davis, despite the fact that we won a championship in the first season, which would have been the last season with New Orleans, that's basically the same mindset that you should have right now. Like, Kyrie isn't under contract next year. And so making the right moves to land him, if he's actually serious about coming to LA, does matter. And so that's kind of where my thoughts are at in regards to, like, just the Russ stuff that's been going on right now. Anything that he does or says, or anything that LeBron says, like, it doesn't have to turn in, unless there's actually an interaction where something happens. I think this is all just a bunch of noise that writers are doing just to fill in the gap because they're just bored. Like, there's summer league games that have gone on, and I hardly see anybody writing about them. It's just every day it's Russ, and so it's annoying. But the reason why I wanted to just kind of record this video is because there are some situations like this Jazz Knicks situations, which are new situations that have now arisen where the Lakers can insert themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised if you hear the Lakers be considered, tabbed as a team that sends that large expiring. Same thing with the Spurs. Like the Spurs, they're bottoming out. Like if Russ goes there, he's going to get bought out, and then he'll go wherever he wants to go. But really, it's his salary, that expiring salary, is what it is. The Nets won't take Russ back because not just because of the talent disparity when it comes to basketball. It's a lot of money, and their owner doesn't want to pay that money. Like that's what it is. It's not about anything else. It's just he doesn't want to pay that money, right? And so if you're not saving the opposing team a bunch of tax money, like they're not going to make that trade. And so that makes sense, and that's why you're hearing more three-team scenarios than you're hearing one-on-one scenarios. But like I said, it's just a holding pattern. You just keep waiting, and that's really all the Lakers can do. And so I know a lot of people have speculated that, the Lakers will run things back with Russ and stuff like that, and that may be a possible thing, but I just don't see it. I think the Lakers front office did a very, very good job, and a lot of people probably won't agree, but I think they did a very, very good job, or certain people in the front office did a very good job villainizing him in a way that didn't need to happen. He didn't play good. He was terrible last year as a basketball player, and he did no favors to himself, with how he kind of talked to media and stuff like that. I can acknowledge, it's not hard to acknowledge something like that. But there was a lot of stuff that was pushed out via national writers that, really didn't need to be pushed out. And what made it worse is they did that only to have the actual players on the roster after the season was over vouch for him, like in a positive way. And so that's part of the issue of what they did. And so I just don't see a situation where they would find a way to reconcile. I think they're really leaning on Darvin Ham to repair that relationship with the team if he's brought back. And I think Russ is also trying to make that work too as well, because he's a pro. He's going to show up to help coach up the summer league guys, and he's going to talk up his coach, and he's going to show up when the coach wants him to show up, because that's just respecting the game and all that sort of stuff, regardless of what he is, whatever his on-court production and stuff like that is. So I'm going to be curious to see what happens, but I just wanted to bring up a team like the Knicks calling on the Lakers to send that single large expiring to a team like the Jazz, who don't want to take on a bunch of extra players, and then the Lakers being a team that's willing to take on some players from the Knicks or take on a bunch of players from the Jazz that are also unwanted to clear their books. That's probably a reasonable way to do it. And I could see both situations. A Knicks, Lakers, Jazz situation. And the reason why I really do believe that is because the Jazz just traded Rudy Gobert to a division rival. It's very possible that the Jazz are going to go into full teardown mode and try to land a top pick in the next draft. And so that was one of the big red flags that I saw. That it wasn't that they traded Rudy Gobert; it's that they traded Rudy Gobert within the division. And so that I think that's a big deal, and that's a big tell that they will probably move towards a rebuilding direction. So I could see a Jazz, Knicks, Lakers sort of 3-team trade being created. I could also see a Nets, Spurs, Lakers, if Kyrie is the person that's involved, 3-team trade being made. It's just a matter of timing and figuring out what the salary is going to look like and what it is that the teams that are aggressively trying to make the move, what it is that they want in return. The Knicks really want Donovan Mitchell. The Jazz are okay with giving him up as long as they get the picks they want, but they probably don't want to bring back the salaries, right? The Nets want to move off of Kyrie. The Nets, Kevin Durant has asked for a trade, so they need to make moves too as well. But they are not bottoming out, right? So they're not the Jazz. They're not trying to bottom out. They still want to field a competitive roster because they don't own their own picks. And so the ask between those two things is going to be a big deal. And the Lakers just have to continue to keep themselves available for the right opportunity. And so as they're waiting for that to happen and they're waiting for those opportunities to present themselves where they can insert themselves in, you're just going to hear a lot more noise. Like you're gonna hear more stuff about, did LeBron talk to Russ? Did Russ talk to LeBron? This is where the relationship is at. Like that's just what's going to happen. And so I wouldn't think too much of it. I would just continue to wait. And so it'll be interesting to see what direction that the Lakers go in, and just kind of how they create these sort of situations. But there are still there are definitely opportunities out there. It's just figuring out the cost and what it is, and how much it actually costs them to make the moves, and how prohibitive that it may be. So, as always, if you guys can like and subscribe, and share it, I appreciate it. Hopefully, this has been a little bit helpful to give folks an idea of how this sort of Jazz, Knicks, Lakers sort of 3-team situation, and what could possibly happen in a 1-to-1 with the Lakers in Indiana, or a 3-team with the Nets, Spurs, and Lakers can sort of work out. If you could like, subscribe, and share the channel, I greatly appreciate it. And as always, I always enjoy these conversations. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and hopefully we'll get to some of that summer league action. Thanks.